Right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start the post-refreshing session, which is the session 1, where we are ready to talk about the service sector, which includes banking and logistics. Very outset, would like to say a very big thank you to our sponsors, the platinum sponsor, Clarion Shipping Private Limited, and a big thank you to gold sponsor, Siam City Cement Lanka Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, to take us through the session 1, I would like to call upon the session chair to take his respective seat. He has a rare combination of being a chartered manager, chartered HR professional, and a chartered electrical engineer. He is acclaimed as a conference speaker, corporate trainer, strategy consultant, author, and an academic. He is the immediate past director and the chairman of the board of management of the Postgraduate Institute of Management, PIM, of the University of Jayewardenepura. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of the Chartered Management Institute, Sri Lanka chapter, being a past president of the Chartered Institute of Professional Personnel Management, he became the first Sri Lankan to lead both CMI and CIPM. He was also the vice president of the Asia Pacific Federation of HR Management, and he is an adjunct professor at the Price College of Business, University of Oklahoma, US, carries 3 decades of private and public sector experience, including Unilever and Nestle, with consultancy engagements in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Commonwealth MDISA Doctoral Fellow, Fulbright Postdoctoral Fellow, and the Commonwealth Postdoctoral Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Ajantha S. Dharmasiri, Professor in Management, Immediate Past Director, PIM. The session chair.
Thank you very much for that introduction, larger than life. Now the challenge is to live up to that. I see people are still coming in, but I think we need to do justice for the allotted time. So it's my bounded duty to do the needful in talking about supply chain management in the service sector. And I feel deeply honored that ISMM invited me to be the first session chair in the service sector aspect of using supply chain for the economic development of the country. And I'll be a thorn among 2 roses. There'll be 2 presenters. So my present task is to introduce them and then invite them to the stage, and they will do their presentations one after the other. And then I will entertain your questions, and I will pass it to them, and they will answer the questions. So my task is relieved because I don't have to answer your questions. So may I take the honor of introducing the first speaker for the conference, first speaker for the first session, Mrs. Shashi Kandambi Jassim, Senior Deputy General Manager, Sampath Bank PLC. So in talking about her, she has joined Sampath Bank in 1989 and counts over 33 years of varied and extensive experience in all aspects of the operations of the banking sector. Currently, she holds the position of Senior Deputy General Manager, International Banking at Sampath Bank PLC. Since assuming duties in the position of Senior Deputy General Manager in 2016, she headed and provided leadership in departments of the bank involved in international banking, corporate and retail banking, treasury, digitalization, legal, and recoveries. At national level, Mrs. Kandambi is the director of the governing board of the Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka. She was conferred a gold medal, top 50 career and professional women award in 2017 by Women in Management in partnership with IFC. She was elected as the president of the Association of Professional Bankers during 2016-2017 and presently functions as an advisory committee member of the same institute. She is also a senior fellow member of the Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka. She holds a master's degree in business administration from PIM, University of Jayewardenepura, a postgraduate diploma in business and finance from the Chartered Institute of Accountants, and the diploma in banking of the Institute of Bankers, Sri Lanka. She followed a leadership program leading the change and organizational renewal at Harvard Business School and corporate finance and foreign exchange hedging at University of Sussex. So without further ado, let me invite Mrs. Shashi Kandambi Jassim to take the seat. And let me introduce the second speaker as well, before inviting Mrs. Kandambi to make her presentation. So the second distinguished speaker is Mrs. Tania Polonnowita Wettimuny, Group Managing Director of IAS Holdings Private Limited. Mrs. Wettimuny is a self-made entrepreneur and Group Managing Director of IAS Holdings Private Limited, an entity that she started building in 2016 after 20 plus years of serving multinational brands in the field of logistics. Among her many business accolades, Tania is honored to have served as the first female chairperson of the Sri Lanka Logistics and Freight Forwarders Association, SLFFA, which is the apex body of the freight forwarding industry. She is the first to hold that title not only in Sri Lanka, but in the entire Indian subcontinent. In May 2022, Tania was awarded the winning position in the category of Business Leadership Excellence in Supply Chain and Logistics at the Top 50 Global Professional and Career Women's Award, 12th edition, hosted in Dubai by Women in Management, WIM. In 2019-2020, she was awarded the Top 50 Professional Career Women Award, 10th edition, Sri Lanka and Maldives by WIM. So we have two winners of the Women in Management awards. She currently serves as a president of the Council for Business with Britain, CBB, and has played a role in the past as a vice chairperson and past treasurer for this organization. Her other professional affiliations include first female president of Sri Lanka Italy Business Council, executive committee member for the Sri Lanka German Business Council, board member of American Chamber of Commerce, AmCham, member of Women's Chamber of Commerce, WCC, Women in Logistics and Transportation, WILAT, and Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, VISTA. She hopes that the headway she has made as a female in the space of business and entrepreneurship inspires other women to break the status quo and work hard to fulfill their dreams. So may I invite Mrs. Tania Polonnowita Wettimuny also to the stage. So now that both of them are settled on the stage and both of them have been introduced, so may I first invite Mrs. Shashi Kandambi Jassim to make her presentation. Shall we give her another round of applause?
Good morning. Let me first thank Mr. Sarath Gamage, President, and the Council for inviting me to share my experience and knowledge as you celebrate your 50th anniversary today. And also, I feel privileged to be in a panel with Professor Dharmasiri, a person that I admire most. Just to give you an idea how big the global trade is, in 2021, the global trade is recorded to be $21,840 million in exact. Now this, to this level of large billion-dollar business, it has grown over a period of time. As Secretary to the Treasury also mentioned, exponentially, we have seen over a couple of decades, the trade has exponentially grown. But come 2020, with the pandemic hitting, it started contraction. 2021, we saw a little bit of increase, but I believe 2022, it would have got extremely contracted and constrained. And moving forward also, I don't think that we will see the global trade happening in the same volume that we used to do. Let us look at the challenges that the global trade is facing. A lot of things were spoken by the previous speakers, our keynote speaker, but I have highlighted few there and will explain only one or two. US dollar liquidity. US dollar is the medium of currency that operates global trade. You know that. And US dollar has strengthened and most subsidiary currencies has weakened against the dollar. Therefore, not only Sri Lanka, because you might think that this problem is only in Sri Lanka, but that is beyond us. Now, you must have experienced the problems when you come to the bank to accommodate your imports, that the banks may be not so much encouraging to handle your imports. And the exporters are today crying because of the mandatory conversion laws that was brought in. Do you know that the Malaysia brought in this mandatory conversion before us? They being a bigger economy, a strong economy with so much reserves. India, closer to our home, another example, they're very strict on export proceeds for the same reason, to secure US dollars for essential imports. I would also like to speak little about the SME finance. SMEs are facing, the hurdles that they are facing in accessing affordable financing. I have given here some statistics. 75% SME requests are getting rejected with regard to trade finance. The reasons, I believe you know. As a result, number of banks who used to handle trade is also declining. The reasons is there in the other slide under world status of banking. Adoption of ALM, you know what's anti-money laundering, that stands for anti-money laundering, and CFT is combating finance of terrorism. These regulations are extremely strict today. And even though global banks invest millions and millions to put those regulations in place, we small banks in developing countries have not been able to maintain at the same level. So therefore, big guys basically close those relationships with the smaller banks across the globe. As a result, we see over 200 correspondent bank relationships have got disappeared from the system since 2008. When I say 200,000 banks, when you consider their branches across the globe, it amounts to more than a million. If this continues, what do you think how the trade is going to be? In that backdrop, my task is to talk to you on commercial banks' role in handling trade. This is again, I'm touching on the global scenario. We become the credible financial intermediary offering trade products. Let me just take you through this. There are two ways that commercial banks help trade. One is providing these services. I'm not going to speak about that because you're very well aware these terms, the LCs, DAs, collections and all that. Not only that, look at the other side, the financing. Today, trade happens on debt. 99% of the trade is financed by the financiers. So if not for these financing trade products, the trade cannot be in this magnitude. Moving into the next point is supply chain. I would like you to see this slide where I have put the format, the process, how the international trade happens. Especially for SMEs, when you have to finance a trade transaction, you could say that the intermediary, there is a financial intermediary. Because the trade is so structured, the financial intermediaries come in between and finance either this side of the transaction or the other side of the transaction. Then moving into digitalization, these benefits, what I have shown here, you might think is only for banks or financiers. Okay? The two outcomes are increase operating efficiency, then minimize operational risk. The impact, the economic impact is not just 10%, 20%, it's coming into 60%, 42%, 200%. What is the resultant of that is the people like you in supply chain management get benefited because when the intermediary financiers reduced its cost, there is a translation, it gets transferred to the cost of trade that you handle. Then moving on to the strong and widespread correspondent banking relationships. I'll just give you an example. You know, Sri Lanka is a small dot in the globe, and Sampath Bank, the bank that I represent, is even insignificant in the global international banking arena. Now, today I maintained 600 correspondent banking relationships to handle your trade. Do you now understand the amount of work at international trade that we do to facilitate your transactions in various currencies across the globe? Then banks also have to adhere to strict governance structures and global trade regulations. Today, I'm happy to say that the Sri Lankan banks are extremely advanced in that sector. Sometimes we find it difficult to work with banks in Bangladesh, India, because those banks do not give that much of prominence to the rules and regulations. That's about the globe. Let's move to closer to home, our country. The situation, the challenges are intense for Sri Lanka. I'm not going to take you through all that, but lack of foreign currency flows for essential imports, we all know. Then the reduced acceptability of Sri Lanka risk. What happened when the country got downgraded? All our correspondent banks stopped adding confirmation or handling our trade transactions. All the umbrellas were removed. Then regulation restrictions. Today, because of for good reasons that the government has come out with various regulations, certain items imports are completely banned, certain items on a temporary suspension list, and some items you need licenses to import, and some items you can't import on a deferred on-site terms, you have to get deferred terms, and that's extremely impossible. So all these measures that are taken for good reasons have affected the trade that you and I are in. Then we are hit by two other matters, that's the rising interest rates. You would have experienced borrowing maybe last year 12 to 15%, and today I don't have to tell you the interest rates, where the interest rates are, it's surpassed 30%. So can anybody do trade with that kind of a cost? And depreciation of rupee had another blow on our head. Then the banks are also not so keen to finance transactions for good reasons. That is, we see our loan assets are becoming stress and stress. So everybody is in a business, so banks are constrained, extremely careful when you have to finance a transaction on trade, especially in this environment. So there is less appetite for financing. When the appetite for financing becomes less, that much difficult and that much impact that will have on the trade. Okay, so important. is important for you to know in that backdrop how banks manage to handle your trade. When the pandemic hit, when our correspondent banks removed all the confirmation lines, but you would have seen to some extent that the trade happened. We managed to brought in essentials that are required to the country. If banks also didn't, work behind the curtains, that trade would have got to a completely halt. How that happened was, even though the bank stopped handling our confirmations, taking the risk, we reached out to development agencies like Asian Development Bank, then IFC, and there are certain other donor agencies. Their mandate is little different to the mandates of commercial banks. Because of the development angle that they looked at, we managed to get those institutions, associations to share our risk. That's how we managed your trade, even in a smaller scale. Then the US dollar crisis. Usually we get short-term financing from our counterparties, banks, but when this situation happened in April with the country downgrade, we had to reach to different institutions that we never reached, and most banks were able to bring in some foreign currency to the country. You know what happened to inward remittances. As a country, we receive about 300 to 350 million US dollars per month as worker remittances. There was an active grey market, and most of these remittances moved to the grey market, resulting banks having very little, meager inflows of US dollars to handle your trade. So banks activated, and also the regulator, the central bank, got in and imposed certain restrictions, and we moved out to the regions, from the Italy and Middle East, where these monies are coming from, and offered the incentives, rewards, and made their transaction flow convenient, so that we were able to get, again, secure those flows coming into the banking formal channels. That's how you must be now experiencing your banks may be accommodating your trade transactions more than it used to be. All these are as a result of the banks tirelessly working on this area. Then innovation. Just like any other industry, bank, the trade finance is also moving into the innovation space. Let me talk a little about the digitalization. Let me start with an example. Today, when you import a consignment, sometimes the consignment comes, but the related documents don't come on time. Courier documents takes more than sometimes 2-3 weeks to reach the bank. And you're with a situation that your consignment has come and it's incurring demurrage, but you can't go to the bank without the documents to clear your cargo. Then you come to us and say, issue me a shipping guarantee. The shipping guarantees come at a cost. That again adds to your trade transaction cost. But if all these documentation move to a digitalization form, how easy our lives are going to be. The breaking news is UK has introduced electronic trade bill to the parliament and it has got passed. But just because UK does that, it is not going to be so popular among us unless otherwise all the other economies, the Europeans, the US, all those markets also get into the same channel. But it is happening now, and we will also move towards that, so that the trade will be not on the physical documents, it will be on electronic documents. That will make all our lives extremely easy. That has to happen to move to the next level, that is the blockchain. We are also working on preparing ourselves to move into blockchain. That's not that much famous there, is yet to come. Just look at this diagram, how the traditional international finance transaction happens. Issuing bank, advising bank, that's myself. Buyer, seller, that's you. Careers, I think Tania represents that area. When you look at the traditional transactions, there's a way that it flows. Either it's clockwise or anti-clockwise. There's no crisscross relationships. Then look at the blockchain trade finance. Everybody is in the same ledger. And even though you can see there are no two banks, there's only one bank there. It looks like that we might go out of business, but that's the way forward. Thank you very much for listening to me. I believe that I was able to give you a glimpse of what international trade and how the commercial bank role is. And I'll wait for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashi. You actually saved more time for the questions by finishing a little early. And Shashi spoke about challenges of the international trade and the role of the commercial banks. So we have come a long way from bronze to bitcoins, a journey where the money has always been the issue. So may I suggest we'll take the questions at the end, and we'll listen to the two presentations, and then take the questions together. Is that a good idea? Okay, thank you. So may I now invite, she has already gone to the podium, Tania, Polonnowita, Wettimuny, to talk about the key role of the logistics sector in reshaping the economy. Shall I give her another big round of applause?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate President Sarath Kamage and the Executive Committee of the Supply and Materials Management on the occasion of 50th anniversary of ISMM. I'm very humbled to be a part of this great milestone achievement. Thank you very much. I'm here to speak today on a subject that is very close to my heart. As you heard before, being the former chairperson of Sri Lanka Logistics and Freight Forwarders Association, the apex body of the industry, as an entrepreneur involved in supply chain, leading a 20 billion top-line organization within span of 4 years, having 2 multinational joint ventures, you can imagine my interest is and always to make sure as an individual and as an industry to support economy to grow to its fullest potential. The industry that I represent has made significant progress over the last 10 years. But as a nation, we are nowhere we could have been, and definitely nowhere near our regional counterparts, such as India, Singapore, and Dubai. In 2010, we were ranked 137 by the World Bank in Logistic Performance Index. Within 2 years, in 2012, we had climbed up to the 89th position. This showed that we truly have the potential to be a frontliner in this field. The most recent LPI ranked India in 44th position, and they are committing to make it to the top 30, whereas unfortunately, Sri Lanka does not have any concrete plans to move up from its current position. I would like to state that one of the main reasons we have not been able to progress beyond a certain point, it's because of our lack of willingness to move forward with the modern world, embracing the digitalization, the technology, and also the failure to create a sustainable political and business climate to conduct businesses. As mentioned, ISMM has requested me to touch on the topic of key role of the logistics sector in reshaping economy. but I have taken the liberty to talk about not only the key role of logistics, but also the challenges, the opportunities, and the way forward as an industry in supply chain. Before we get deeper into the subject, let me share with you some brief statistics of the role of logistics in our economy. These statistics are taken from the Sri Lanka Export Development Board. Sri Lanka Logistics Service contribute 2.5% of GDP, which represent around $2 billion US. The industry contributes an estimated 7% to the national exports. We are very pleased that we provide direct employment to approximately 50 to 75,000 people. Around 70% of service providers are local, while the rest are multinational entities. Currently, there are 130 shipping agencies, 150 freight forwarders, such as myself, and plus 500 companies registered with the Merchant Shipping Secretariat in Sri Lanka. This also includes clearing and forwarding agents. Understanding the vital role the logistic plays in our economy, it is imperative that we work towards improving and uplifting the infrastructure, leverage on the latest technology to add value to the service offering to make sure we are in par with the regional competition. The most importantly, we need to build our human resources capital to support and reshape the fallen economy. The global logistic is $5 trillion US industry, and we could easily have our share of the pie if we collaboratively achieve seamless logistics platform in Sri Lanka. It is clear that an economy cannot survive without a sustainable supply chain. Since logistics is the live wire in the supply chain, it is fundamental to continuously improve the logistic performance for a long-term growth. Innovative logistic solutions lead to an efficient supply chain, which leads to a sustainable economic growth. It is important to note there are 8 deliverables expected in efficient supply chain management, which could add benefit and support to our growing economy. There are product, price, quantity, quality, statutory, time, information, and place. We as an industry have to work on each individual component in order to have comprehensive and seamless service offering. We must not forget the critical role the government should play by making sure we have a conducive and peaceful environment to do business. The government plays a critical part too with the formulating policies that overlooks the fundamentals. Prior to COVID, as you know, logisticians were never given a priority in the supply chain. Sadly, we were at the bottom end of the supply chain. However, during the COVID, everyone from the President of the United States, considered to be one of the most powerful people in the world, to the homemakers in rural Sri Lanka, realized that world consumption would come to a standstill if the activators of the supply chain stayed at home. We as an industry had to ensure that we got food to the shelves, raw materials got to the factories, and medical supplies got to the hospitals on time despite of the lockdown and ravaging pandemic. All this had to be done while ensuring safety of our frontline staff so that they wouldn't endanger themselves or their families at home. The challenges were endless, but our teams worked around the clock to get the work done. What does it say? It shows the bravery, adaptability, resilience of our industry. Most importantly, it showed the strength of our people and the true Sri Lankan spirit. Logistics is an industry that has been in existence for centuries, but as mentioned, it gained recognition and importance only during the pandemic. Not only confined to the supply of essentials to the industry, and also supported the exporters to deliver their merchandise to their customers within the minimum disruption in the supply chain. Our exporters dependent on logisticians to deliver their merchandise to the customers all over the world, and just in time. Considering e-commerce increased tremendously, the consumers in Sri Lanka also depended on us to ensure their requirements were available on time. Logisticians made sure seamless connectivity and real-time coordination with the shipping lines, airlines, border agencies, ports, airports to make sure undisrupted service was provided to the exporters so that the country could earn much needed foreign exchange during the difficult times. The World Bank Logistic Performance Index, LPI, analyzes countries through 6 indicators: customs, infrastructure, service quality, timelines, international shipments, track and trace. In 2018, the World Bank Logistic Performance Index ranked Sri Lanka in the 94th position, while the other well-known hubs in the region, such as Singapore and Dubai, were ranked at 7th and 11th respectively. This does mean that we have a long journey ahead of us. In this endeavor, I am happy to mention that industry leaders have played a leading role by bringing all the stakeholders together and working on common agenda to improve the world perception of logistics in Sri Lanka, which would result in higher LPI ranking. While we have made several strides in the right direction over the few years, our economy can gain more by investing in the right infrastructure and focusing on areas where we are weak as a country. In any country, for logistics to improve its service offering and to be in par with the regional competition, infrastructure, technology, and the availability of the correct human capital plays a major role. We also require easy access to port, airports, quick turnaround of goods coming from other countries, which leads to overall improvement of productivity. If you look at Sri Lanka today, we rely 100% on road transportation connectivity, which means it is time-consuming, high dependency, and great negative impact to the environment. Due to the current economic crisis, we are also losing our trained human capital to the rest of the world for obvious reasons. The world is moving towards creating seamless connectivity using digitalization on all processes. We as a country, once again, are far behind with embracing modern world technology and investing in research and development. Thus, it impacts our productivity, real-time accessibility, and causes destruction and delays in stakeholder connectivity. For example, customs, ports, border agencies should have been in connected long time ago in order to avoid delays and repetition of day-to-day work. Due to lack of understanding and unwillingness to change the current system by all stakeholders, we still use old procedures and processes, policies with massive loopholes, creating disruptive environment for the businesses in our economy. We are indeed happy to note that government of Sri Lanka has recognized the logistics and logistic industry and has contribution to the economy, declared 16th August as a National Logistics Day. However, at this moment, the logistic industry needs solutions from the government on many areas. As all of us are deeply affected by the economic crisis in the country, the USD shortage has made Sri Lanka less competitive on freight negotiations, and we are far behind meeting our financial obligations to some of our foreign principals. With few challenges I mentioned, we as a country still possess great opportunity if we follow through a national policy to bring the required systems in place, leaving politics aside. The national policies in maritime, logistics, or in any other industry should be long-term and should be formulated considering the impact to the entire economy and support the development of economy. Even though there have been national maritime policies created in the past and certain other policies related to our industry, they have not seen the light of the day because of the change of governments. Look at our proximity to India, the country which is tipped to be the third largest economy of the world in the coming years, and additionally Bangladesh, which is one of the fastest growing economies of the world. These two neighboring nations give us an immediate market and great opportunities. I'm sure all of you will agree with me when I say that Sri Lanka's geographical position is ideal for South Asia's logistics hub. That being said, if we are to become a true regional hub, I must say, in the true sense of the word, we need to improve our own performance and become what Hong Kong became and still is to China. We have been talking for decades about our geographical positioning, especially during recent times. There has been a lot of discussion about the Silk Route. We have approximately 300 vessels passing our borders. And if we start to provide logistical services such as bunkering, stevedoring, ship supplies, and provide other value-added services where our country could earn much needed foreign currency through those services. Further, using the current hub concept, we will have the opportunity to use Sri Lanka as a hub for providing value-added services for global brands by providing global packaging, global labeling, quality control, inventory control, and so many other value-add services. Further enhancing on e-commerce, we can further enhance much needed foreign currency revenue to our economy. We must also capitalize our geographical positioning and promote entrepôt trade, bonded warehousing, multi-country facilities, air, and sea-air transshipment through Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, we as a nation, we have not marketed our country to fullest its potential. Sadly, both private sector and the government sector have failed in this aspect. It is the responsibility of all industries, all businesses, all business leaders, and us as individuals to make sure to put country before anything else. It is the government responsibility to have an environment that is conducive to doing business, peace, and corruption-free, with the right policies for the private sector to develop businesses, bringing new businesses into the country, and to support the growth of our economy. As a logisticians, we have showcased to the world, especially this during COVID, by providing undisruptive service to our customers, that Sri Lanka is the place for them to consider as a base for their business operations. And we will continue to do so to support our economy. Once again, thank you very much to ISMM for inviting me to speak today, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tania, for that interesting presentation on the key role of the logistics sector in reshaping the economy. So, having listened to both presentations, we have got a banking sector perspective and we have got a logistics perspective. Now it is open for questions. So, while allowing you to think about your questions, may I start with 2 questions for each, and then the microphones will come to you. Please raise your hand, a mic will come to you, and then you can mention to whom you are directing the question. Then I can easily ask one of the 2 distinguished ladies to answer. To begin with, Shashi, you mentioned about the challenges that banks are facing right now with the global economic challenges and the local challenges in the post-pandemic era. Now, if you look at the exporters are having their own set of problems, importers are having their own set of problems, they're all to do with supply chain. So what is your advice as a senior banker to the exporters as well as to the importers? Key advice.
The problem that the importers are facing today is lack of dollars, because banks have not been able to provide the same level of assistance, because the banks also have only limited dollars, and that is being used for essential imports. What I see is that the advice that I can give you is maybe not that easy, but it is the time for importers also to look at how best that you can work on diversification to see whether you can be of some kind of exports, getting into export business. The large conglomerates have done that. Biggest conglomerate today has an advantage because they have certain export companies in their groups. The central bank do not allow the fund transfers from import company to an export company, but for all practical purposes, if I am the bank handling that account, and if I see that some of the companies in the group is channeling dollars through us, finally it's coming to the country, and they get a priority line for their imports. So even for conglomerates and also SMEs, a good example I can give is, I have one of my customers, I think generation and generations, they have been doing imports, the PETA traders. But mind you that some of the PETA traders are now exporters. The person who used to bring lentils, sugar, rice to the country is now exporting cinnamon and spices to India. So people are looking at opportunities for exports. It could be not manufacturing, because manufacturing takes time. If you can get in touch with even software, technology, or some services, that will be an advantage as against a company who wants to be in purely on imports.
Thank you, Shashi. So let me turn to Tania. You mentioned a lot about the significance of the logistics as a sector and the recognition that it deserves to have. If you look at the SME sector, because that comprises the bulk of the Sri Lankan economy. So what is your advice as an entrepreneur to the SME sector, which is faced with so many challenges?
Thank you once again. I think in any industry, when you're SME, what is important is to understand your positioning of your brand, right? Every brand represents some uniqueness. So once you understand where you want to position your branding or your businesses, I think it's a easy way to then look at your customer portfolio. So the positioning of your branding is very important in any industry.
Okay, thank you. So you need to have the clear positioning. I saw some hands going up. Shall we start with Mr. Ganesh? Can we have a microphone for this gentleman in the front row? And please raise your hand, the microphone will come to you. Please.
My question is to the first speaker, the banker. We in supply chain commenced e-commerce on a B2B business basis some 25 years ago. But in supply chain, one of the bottlenecks have always been the bankers when it comes to import. Of course, freight forwarders came next because you could never get a shipping guarantee. This problem of original documents. Don't you think it's rather late? The banks have been sleeping for almost 25 years. I mean, not local banks, internationally. Bankers have been sleeping and making life difficult for supply chain people by not having introduced e-documentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. We are moving towards that. It's just the banks cannot do it because there has to be legislation. Acceptability of international document is a global issue. That's why I said there is a bill that has been passed in UK, and the whole globe is working towards that. We are talking about international trade. It's not just one party can do it, it has to be accepted globally. So it is happening, sir. So I think it will happen faster because of the pandemic that we found that people want to move into more digital systems. I must take this opportunity to say that, you know, even though the banks have digital platforms to accommodate trade, there's very, very little usage of those platforms. It's extremely difficult for supply chain people using that. I myself have good experience. My bank has invested in trade platforms so many years, and it's in dollars that we have financed, but usage is not even 25%. So there is an obligation on all of us in this supply chain, the banks, the importer, the exporter. The moment you start using it, it will get popularized, and then we can improve starting from there. Thank you.
Okay. Second question, there's a gentleman. Please.
I have two
so we will come
questions.
to you as a third question, please.
Two questions, one each to the two panelists. First, Jesse, now there had been much hype or song and dance about an alternate transaction currency. China was very upbeat of it, followed by Russia. What has happened to it? And the next question is to Tania. Now you spoke of a conducive environment, whereas in reality what we see is deterrence. The most recent tax reforms. My question is that how do you propose to counter that as an industry? Are you trying to run away to a place like Chittagong or some place like that? Or what is your take on it? Thank you.
Can I answer, Shashi? It's okay. The question is if government statutory payments are mandatory, only as an industry we can lobby. So to answer that, no, we are not going to run away. From the association side, SLFA, we have lobbied, and we are in discussions to mitigate the tax impact into our businesses, because it will have obviously our investors, especially if you're looking to encourage multinationals to set up entities in Sri Lanka with this sort of a taxation, it's going to be a task, because nobody will want to come here and pay such high taxes. They would then probably go into a place like Bangladesh and set up businesses. By saying that, I think today we have to find ways to sustain our businesses. I'm sure the industry will find ways of sustaining business and encouraging the multinationals and existing customers and the network partners to remain in Sri Lanka. So to answer, we are not going to run away. We are in discussion with the necessary bodies to mitigate the tax impact to our industry.
So it reminds me recently there was a WhatsApp message saying earlier it was pay while you earn, now it will be pay what you earn in time to come. So there was a question from that end. Can you pass the microphone to that gentleman? Please stand up so others can see you. And then you get the mic and answer the question.
Can I answer?
Yes, please. There's another part and then we
There was
will come to you, sir.
Yes. You ask about the single currency. You understand the geopolitical situation. Do you think that the countries will come together and agree for a single currency? What happened to euro? UK went out of euro. So there are, I think, political issues that we need to agree first before we all come into a single currency for global transactions.
Shall we give the chance to that gentleman? There's another question from here and your chance will be the fifth one. Yes. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the two wonderful presentations. I'm Air Commodore Tushara Fernando from Sri Lanka Air Force. My question goes to Mrs. Shashi Kandambi. You are talking about the rising rate of interest and the inflation in the country. And it's true that we are facing a dollar crisis, and because of that, that may be the one fine reason for high rate of inflation in the country. And you were citing about the foreign remittances, worker remittances, that the main reason why the foreign remittance did not receive through the government and the private banks was fixing the dollar during the previous regime, and without allowing the dollar to be fluctuated. And then people have chosen to transfer money through Undial and Hawala. Because of that, much needed foreign remittances were lost. And even after the release in the dollar, now it has surpassed 350, but still people are not sending the entire foreign remittances to Sri Lanka. So as you said, you indicated that about 300 to 350 million of foreign remittances are receiving, but I believe that it should be much higher. So don't you think that it is a failure of public and private sector banks to market and get this foreigners' income to the country as foreign remittances, because that is the only way that we can have dollar reserves to strengthen the dollar reserve.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please answer.
I wish you would have asked this question when the Treasury Secretary was here. Yes, banks do a lot of work on trying to get the remittances, but the central bank is also have a duty to maintain the FX rate. You might think that if you can't basically erode 100% these informal systems are. We could only manage it so that a bulk of the money that will flow through us. I also need to correct you, it's not the worker remittances only. The most, the impact came from the tourism. We lost tourism. That's about 4 to 5 billion US dollars revenue per annum for Sri Lanka. As long as there is a pegged on the foreign currency, now dollar, you know, it's a sort of controlled, it's not fully floated, it's a pegged control that we have. As long as it is there and there is more demand outside US dollars, there is a gray market. But what we are trying to do is banks trying to reach them and give them the efficiency for them to send the flows to the country, and also in different ways. When you can't give a better price, you have to reward them in a different way. That's why all these incentive schemes or rewards are given to encourage foreign remittances to the country.
I hope you got the answer. We have another question from the front. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Wettimuny, Chartered Electrical Engineer by profession. Actually, I need to raise this question from Ms. Tania. You talk about digital transformation. Actually, that is the way that should be. And we can see the prior here, we can see few drones are flying. So supply chain, this should be enriched with these drones. Because if you take some example, how the blood bank is going to supply the blood to nearby hospitals, even in Colombo. So that is that has been a real challenge, and I need to have some idea about from you because I am new to this your subject. What are the challenges that are being there when introducing these drone systems, and is there any initiatives that has been taken by your profession? I think that is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, but I'm not very thorough with the drones and to talk about I know definitely it will help the industry, but I cannot go into details because I'm not very familiar with the drone system. But let me tell you something. Before we get to that, you heard in my speech that I said we have many other steps to implement. The basic technology, the connectivity with the board agencies, those are mandatory before we talk about bringing the robotic supports or the drones into the supply chain. The fundamentals have to be right? So we are far behind in bringing the fundamentals into the supply chain, right? Embracing the modern technology. Shashi spoke about blockchain, which is very important, right? That can add a lot of value into the supply chain. But as a country, we are far behind because it has to be also not just the private sector. The government has to support, especially in line bringing the border agencies into the new modern systems. So we are far behind. And to answer your question, maybe later on I can connect you with somebody who can actually give you some more details about the drones. Okay?
I think that is the time that is allotted to you. You can have a chat during the lunch to get more insights from these two well-experienced ladies. They're experts in their own field. So I think it was a wonderful experience for me also to being the thorn among the two roses. So let's formally conclude this session and handing over to the compere once again. Thank you very much for your wonderful interaction.
Thank you very much. Would like to call upon the session chair and the two speakers to remain as we are ready to present you with a very special token of appreciation. To do the honors, can we have the chairman of the 50th Management Committee along with the president of the Institute of Supply and Materials Management over here, gentlemen, please. Can we have Mr. Sanath Gamage and Mr. Jayantha presenting first to the two ladies, ladies and gentlemen, the two tokens of appreciation. First we have Mrs. Shashi Kandambi Jassim, Senior DGM, International Banking, Sampath Bank PLC. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Shashi Kandambi Jassim. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Tania Polonnowita Wettimuny. Thank you very much. Session Chair. Right, thank you very much. The session chair and the two panelists.